Hi, I'm Roxy. I'm a fantasy illustrator. I'm always striving to get better at my craft, so I do a lot of painting studies in my spare time. This one I painted earlier this month, and it gives me a great excuse to talk about bloom lighting. So I'm going to explain what bloom is, how to paint it, and also how to kind of cheat it in. So, really good example of bloom is parking lot glare. You emerge from a dimly lit store, you walk out onto the parking lot, your eyes haven't quite adjusted yet, and the sun hits all those metal cars and turns them into the fires of Gondor. Um, or even at night, like let's say you're driving your car and all the street lights are out. Maybe that's not a good example for most of you, but in South Africa, that happens a lot. Um, And so your pupils are dilated to take in as much light as you can. And then a car comes around the corner and its headlights light up your windshield like you're getting flashbanged. So that would be your in real life bloom lighting scenarios. The conditions required for bloom lighting is a bright light source like this and or something reflecting said light source like the metal cars in the parking lot, or something wet and glossy like water, or just light in color like these white clouds. In real life, the bloom occurs because your eyes haven't adjusted quickly enough to the changing light. In photography, it's because the camera settings are primed for overexposure. In 3D or CGI, it'll be because of post processing via choices you make in compositing and rendering. And in painting, it's really just down to the artist's knowledge of what it's supposed to look like and the skill and will to get it done. So let's analyze a couple of photos first and see what's really happening visually. So here's an old photo of the Apollo launch, I believe it is. So we have our light source and it is creating bloom on this metal scaffolding. The metal is not just reflecting the white glow, but the glow is actually eating up the details in the scene. So you no longer see individual poles in places, you get these flat areas of white. Okay, here's a bedroom lamp with some bloom. Here's the same type of lamp, but the photographer has, in this case, adjusted for the right exposure. So we can see the outline of the lamp clearly, but with bloom, when the exposure is a little off, the light extends in such a way that it flattens out the details and obscures the shape of the lamp. Here's a photo of some windows. The photographer, besides getting some nice chromatic aberration happening, I want to draw your attention to the bloom that he's captured. Like, have a look at this shape over here. See how the bloom dominates the windowsill. It actually eats into the windowsill and changes the shape of that glow. Here's another window. This stained glass on this side has a minimal bloom, but the one on this side, the bloom is blowing out some of the details and eating up some of the dark bits. So bloom is when the light blows out the details in the highlighted area, and in strong cases, it bleeds into the area around it. It's not just a glow, it's an extension. In real life, obviously, bloom is horrible because of the glare on your eyes. Even in 3D or CGI, it can be a bit much. Computer games that incorporate bloom typically allow you to turn it off in the settings. But in photography and in paintings, bloom is great because you have the beauty of the glow sans the pain of the light. Just a quick few examples of paintings that use it really well. Here's a Rembrandt where you can see this line is becoming indistinct because of the bloom from the window. Here is an Albert Bierstadt with some gorgeous bloom on the water edge, bleeding up into the embankment. Here's a more recent one. This is 2017. by Stephen Deleuze, where the bloom on these peaks are so blinding that we don't see any detail on the rocks there. Okay, so I'm going to do a legit painting demo shortly, but I also mentioned in the start of the video that I would show you a way to kind of cheat it in. So I wanted to do that first. This does require having painting software that has layer blend modes and clipping masks, which I dare say is most of them. Okay, to test with, I'm using one of my own illustrations. This fiery lion is going to appear in a children's fantasy book by Ariane Gardner. It's not out yet. I've still got a few illustrations to do, but the author has given me permission to show this. And I thought a nice place to add bloom would be the mane, which is literally flaming. So for this to work, you need everything on one layer. So it's not something you do mid-painting. This is post-processing. So step one is duplicate the layer so that we have got two of the same thing. I'm going to set the top layer now to a blending mode that targets the highlights and blows them out. And from my testing, the best one is linear dodge. Not linear light, not linear burn, linear dodge. It's also sometimes called add. So, for example, Rebel calls it linear dodge. Painstorm Studio, which I'm in right now, calls it add. And Photoshop calls it linear dodge, but then it's got add in brackets. So it'll either be called linear dodge or add. So if I toggle this on and off, you can see that the main area has got some good bloom happening. But of course it's wrecked the rest of the painting too. So the next step is we're going to add a clipping mask, and then we're going to fill that clipping mask with black. And what that does is it hides everything on that layer. And then what we do is we switch to a white paintbrush, we paint on the clipping mask to reveal the bloom only where I want it. If I reveal too much, I can always switch back to my black brush to hide it. So you paint with black to hide, you paint with white to bring it out. So I actually like how this turned out. In fact, I'll ask the author if she prefers this. So we'll see which one ends up in the book. One last thing before the painting demo I wanted to do is pull this into Procreate as well, because Procreate has the ultimate cheat. It's got a bloom slider. So what you need to do is you head up here, click bloom, and then you can adjust how much bloom you want by dragging your stylus or finger from side to side. And again, if it's affecting some areas of the painting that you don't particularly want it to, you can always just duplicate the layer before you apply the bloom. Okay, then we apply the bloom. Let's make it about there-ish. Okay, then I go back up here and add a mask. Then I've got to switch to black and I fill the mask. That hides the details. Then I can switch to white and I can just paint in the areas of the bloom where I want it. I hope that you can see this. I know the lighting isn't the greatest in my office. So that is the post-process way of adding bloom to a finished piece. But now in the beginning of the video, I showed you this magnificent photo. I don't know who the photographer is, sadly. I would love to credit them. All I could figure out is it's been floating around social media since 2018. And like I said, I did a painting study of it, which is what you're seeing there. I wasn't too concerned about the geometry, the shapes, the angles. It was more about the lighting. I wanted to capture the feeling of it. And the thing about any good lighting study is, sure, you can paint the reference and you can paint it accurately, but if you can paint something else into the scene and make it look like it belongs, then we've got ourselves an applied study, which is way better. It means that you've retained the knowledge and you actually know what's going on. So what I decided to do was I roughly painted in 3 foxes from photo reference found on Pinterest. Again, I don't know who the photographers are because Google reverse image search has become increasingly more useless. But point is, I'm now going to see if I can add some believable bloom so that these foxes look like they actually belong to the scene. Now, the scene overall is backlit. That was decided by the photographer, so my job is easy. All I have to do is look and see how the light is applied to the tree. I can see it's on both sides of the tree, both the left and the right. So I have to apply my highlights to the foxes to both their left and their right. And sometimes I find it a little easier to make the brush a little bigger than what I need and paint over the area and then use the eraser to just cut into it rather than making the brush at the exact size, because sometimes just the markings of the brush, the texture of the brush just looks better when the brush is a little bigger. So I paint a little bit and then I carve out, slightly growing it past where I think the natural edge of the fox would be. What you saw me doing previously is I had the foxes all on one layer. I used alpha lock so that I could paint within the shape without going outside of the shape, just to get the basic highlights in. But now what I'm doing is I'm painting on a new layer and trying to extend that glow outside of the fox's initial shape, because remember, bloom doesn't just light up the area, it actually extends from the area. Basically, I'm identifying where I want the bloom, and I use a bright white, flattening out the values in that area, so I don't want detail. And for this particular scene, I'm making sure to use the same messy textured brush that I used for the rest of it. But if this was more of a polished painting, I would probably use a medium-edged brush. I'm thinking a sharp, hard edge brush might not be able to sell the fact that it is a glow, and an airbrush would probably be too soft and gradual. So you want something in between. I decided against adding bloom to the fox in the foreground because that one's kind of more in the shade. So really just left the bloom on the 2 foxes that are right next to the tree. So here's the final piece, and you're wondering maybe what are the foxes actually doing? What's in the tree that's got them so interested? Well, I'm not going to tell you. I think that's for the viewer to decide. So I hope this was useful. Thank you to my dear patrons. Appreciate you so much. And thank you for watching. Much obliged if you leave a like and subscribe. Until the next one, God bless.